Good afternoon and welcome to Cold Chain Insights, the podcast that focuses everything temperature-controlled logistics for the pharmaceutical industry. My name's Thomas Hunt, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Niko Polvinen, who is CEO and co-founder of Logmore. Niko, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm doing really well.
Good. It's great to have you on. I think a really good place to start would be maybe a bit of background to your career so far, and then obviously your current role there at Logmore.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, my background before Logmore is from software development. I used to work for a logistics centric like AI startup before Logmore, so kind of like a logistics connection already there. And then we had a software development company with a few friends before Logmore, and that's kind of like how we got to know each other. The three founders of us. So he got the original idea for dynamic QR codes, and he was basically a customer for us back in the day. So that's how we got to know each other.
How was the business founded then? I was interested to ask. You're obviously you were sort of not in the space originally. So how did you get into cold chain logistics, pharma logistics, and how did the sort of first 6 months start as a company?
Yeah, well, the start was very technical, I would say, like very product centric. Like we had the idea for dynamic QR codes as a way to transfer data very easily, and we started from market research for data loggers. Like we checked the USB data loggers available back then. Like it was 2017 then, like 8-9 years ago. But then we saw the market fit for our product and started the R&D, and then kind of like how we ended up to the pharma space. That happened maybe like a few years later during the COVID-19 pandemic. Like we had to do something for the use case of monitoring the vaccines, and then simultaneously we saw that our solution actually fits the market really well. So basically, since we have been very heavily focusing on the pharma, the life science healthcare market.
Right. So when you were first looking into the in 2017 into the technology, what was it for a different application? Were you looking at perishables and food primarily, or a completely different sector for that?
Yeah, perishables and food was I guess the main one in the beginning, because we expected that to be like, let's say, an easier starting point rather than pharmaceuticals with all the regulations and the quality requirements.
Right. Okay. And I did read that you've been described as a businessman with the heart of a developer, which is obviously your start and your origin. And how does that approach how you solve supply chain problems today? How do you look at things?
That's a really good question, and I guess that describes me quite well. I still do code every now and then as a hobby, and I do like that. I like user interface design and stuff like that. So when we are implementing or even like meeting potential new customers, I tend to like go through their processes very accurately. I can, if they need some sort of tailoring or kind of like how to best fit our solution into their existing processes, I can just open a Figma to draw out the user interface. In the meeting, I've done it a few times and just on the set kind of like designed how it should be for them.
Right. Okay. And are your other two co-founders bring different skills, or are you all typically sort of developer codes from the outset?
Yeah, we have technical backgrounds, but yeah, Jan, our current CTO, is like more of a like hardware and much more technical capable background than I do. So he can handle everything from the like embedded software to the hardware design to then the cloud side of things. So basically, he's responsible for those things nowadays.
Right. Yeah. And so during that, when COVID sort of hit and you realized there was an opportunity there for your technology, what was the problem that you specifically saw in pharma logistics for Logmore, and how does the technology you've developed solve it?
Yeah, well, it was during the COVID and during the like even very early days of Logmore, like, and even still today, I would say that the USB data loggers are the de facto solution used in the market. And already, when we were founding the company, we were seeing that to be like soon outdated tech, because we felt that the value of data could be very high from the loggers if you are able to accumulate the information and kind of like learn from your processes through the data. And already back in 2017, big data was maybe like what AI is today, and we thought that we can really make a solution that kind of like optimizes certain processes, makes it faster, easier to collect the data, and then you actually have like full 100% data retrieval rate from your operations.
Okay, and how does the software do that? Because I did see that you've got your own loggers obviously in play as well, but in terms of the platform, can you talk us through what's unique about it and how does it pull data and what kind of information is it feeding back to, say, quality, etc., in supply chains?
Yeah, our solution from that perspective is very unique. We use QR codes. We're the only one to use that sort of a tech because we filed a patent for it back in 2017, and it's our proprietary tech in that sense. So essentially, each of the data loggers show a QR code on the screen, and the QR code changes all the time. Every time there is a new measurement, the QR code changes. So you can scan it with any smartphone to upload the measurement history straight to our cloud. And in the cloud, basically the data is decrypted from the QR code and then kind of like exposed to different report templates and so on. So the quality can see deviation reports and so on.
Right. Okay. So in terms of that QR code piece, is that only integrated with a Logmore device, or is that something that can be integrated into their traditional device they're already using in the lane?
It's only on the Logmore data loggers.
Yeah. And in terms of what customers have to do as an alternative, what is that process, and what sort of time savings have you seen from customers, and how's it playing out in sort of real life scenarios?
Yeah, I would say the biggest time saving comes at the recipient of the shipment when you're receiving like let's say a pallet of pharmaceuticals of some sort. With USB data logger or similar, you would need to take the device, go to a PC, plug it in, download data, maybe send a couple of emails, something like that. With our solution, you essentially scan a single QR code with any smartphone or industrial QR code scanner, and instantaneously you will see on your display like a thumb up, shipment okay kind of a message, and you instantly know if the goods are good to go.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that you've got, you say, patents granted on that, and why the industry didn't adopt it sooner. What was the sort of technical step that you maybe needed to take to do this? Because it seems quite obvious what you're describing, but clearly it wasn't for many years in terms of this sector. And obviously, traditionally, people have used Bluetooth and cellular and IoT approach, and you've gone down QR code technology effectively, haven't you? Which is a different approach.
Yeah, there has been a lot of technical things we've needed to solve, like very technical things, how to get maximum amount of data into a single QR code, how to get the battery life long enough, these sort of things. But I don't know. I guess in general, we could say about the industry that changes are not that fast. So it just takes time to implement new solutions into this industry.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a long time, but once they're in, they're in. So
Yeah.
I think that's always the way. And what's one of the big sort of misconceptions you've seen around cold chain monitoring that the industry sort of still thinks applies, but maybe in your opinion doesn't, or this new way of potentially doing things? What are the sort of barriers that tend to come up in conversations with customers?
Yeah, I think like we talk about a lot of like USB data loggers here. Then the other part of the industry are these real-time connected cellular devices. We kind of like fall in between of those two. We offer a lot of the real-time connected device capabilities, kind of like in the price point and size, and that's sort of like a more like the passive category. So we like from our perspective, we often see this requirement for real-time data, at least in the beginning of the conversations, that there's from somewhere high up there's a requirement to have real-time position, real-time temperature data. But quite often when we actually start to kind of like dig in like what's behind it, it's just nice to have for many solutions. Honestly, you're not able to that often actually do any changes during the journey. Like if the goods are somewhere on the way, you must wait for them to arrive before you're actually able to take action.
Yeah. So are you saying that you sort of believe potentially that real-time view is slightly oversold as a benefit, because in reality, when a shipment's, as you say, whether if you can see an issue, if you've got the ability to change things on the tarmac or when it arrives at its destination, then fantastic. But in reality, that's probably not going to be able to happen unless you've got a very good partner or a very good communication with that terminal.
Yeah, of course, there are use cases where you are able to do those things.
Mm.
Like if you have very expensive shipment that millions, tens of millions euros of worth of shipment, of course you have to do, and you can probably do quite a bit even during the journey if something starts to go wrong. But that's not the majority of shipments going around the world. So most of the time you actually need the data kind of like at the right time, not in the real time. And from my perspective, I think the right time is when the shipment arrives somewhere. So then you can actually, in that moment, make decisions, make changes, adjustments, whatever is needed.
Yeah. Okay. And just moving on to some industry trends. I know you've written extensively about direct to X models in pharma. What's driving that shift, in your opinion?
Well, cost saving is, of course, a big trend. And then kind of like the maybe the Amazon effect could be like a title for that.
Hmm.
Kind of like everyone wants everything instantaneously, at your doorstep.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And how prepared do you think the industry is for direct to patient and home-based therapy deliveries in terms of where we kind of want it to be? As you're right, those Amazon models are in place and we know how they operate, but how's our industry in terms of the infrastructure and ability to do it, do you think?
Honestly, it's not really there yet, I would say. Of course, there's a lot of development and there's already these processes, but and I know our solution is being used for deliveries to the patients and to homes of people. We kind of like have some sort of a touch point to this industry, and it's definitely
Mm.
growing fast, and there's a lot of opportunities there, but there's also still a lot of let's say challenges to solve.
Yeah, for sure. And what's the biggest risks you see then in that sector or in general pharma cold chain that probably isn't being talked about enough at sort of industry events like Logipharma, or where are the gaps?
Biggest risk not talked about, like I think in pharma space a lot of the risks are talked about a lot.
Hmm.
Like what is not talked about so often, I guess, is what we've seen also with some of our customers, kind of like their previous processes when they are upgrading to Logmore. We see some, Excel spreadsheet macro kind of data management.
Mm.
And at least with my developer background, I see that as a big risk, because when like a human is manipulating or managing the data, there's always a risk that you copy paste the wrong row or something like this. So at least that's something I haven't seen being talked about that much.
Yeah, I think we have seen that some departments are, as you say, sort of Excel and having to manage sort of their quality information on Excel still or
Mm.
similar. And is that mainly then just a human error of having to, as you're saying, those parts? Or are there other risks around that approach that really is eliminated by technology like yours that you see?
I think it's like the human error is a big part of it, and it also like it's not only like having maybe wrong data or something like that, but it kind of like the risk can also emerge from like not having clear instructions or clear processes on who does what and when. Like often these processes are implemented in a way that there's like a shared inbox for emails or something like that, and then
Mhm.
maybe just no one actually does anything when like a deviation happens or something like this. So there's these sort of kind of like related risks.
Yeah. And so how do you see the role of data changing GDP compliance, quality, or generally temperature controlled logistics over the next couple of years? What are we going to walk into, do you think?
Well, we are already moving from spot checks to continuous monitoring and having more and more data, maybe to prove that the product is good rather than prove that you follow the process, which kind of like has been the practice with the spot checks that you
Hmm.
do every now and then, like you place a logger to every tenth of a shipment or something like that, and then you get some sort of a proof that you are following a process. And that kind of like, I guess, leads to a place where data is becoming competitive advantage rather than just a regulatory must-have, which I think is an interesting change.
Yeah, and are you seeing? We've had various people on here talking about the amount of information or data they're having to process is a problem, and obviously not, and the amount of noise they get from data that isn't necessarily useful when they're trying to manage their shipments.
Mm.
Is that something you're seeing? Is that something that Logmore can help sort of facilitate and sort that problem? Because I know it's quite a big one for most customers.
Yeah, it's definitely is there. And from our perspective, like we have built our solution like ground up just a few years ago with modern technology. So our cloud is capable of doing all sorts of automations, and we built very different automation processes for different customers where like things like product release can be actually automated to quite a good level because you can
Mm-hmm.
have like a stability budget information and these sort of kind of like data combined to help you with the decision making. So it kind of like can filter the most important information automatically for you, so you don't need to go through like the temperature charts, for example. It just tells you that was it good or not.
Yeah. Okay. And so what innovation excites you most then right now? What have you seen that you think could be a real game changer for the industry, and what do you think might be coming in the next couple of years?
Well, everyone talks about AI, obviously, nowadays. So there's a lot of opportunities there. There are already some very exciting things I've seen. AI making calls automatically, handling calls to like a carrier, handling your shipments and stuff like that. It's very exciting, of course. Then again, like more from a Logmore's perspective, I think we're going to see more and more solutions aiming to monitor products on unit level. So I think the monitoring is kind of like going closer and closer to the actual products being monitored. So eventually, I don't think we're that far off, honestly, from like having like product unit level temperature monitoring like throughout the lifetime of the product.
Yeah, agreed. I think we're getting closer and closer, aren't we, to that? And I think I've had a few people say it. So and it's a big benefit for everyone. I think when you're mapping a pallet and a temperature of an entire pallet with just 3 logger positions on the outside, it's not a true reflection of the internal temperature or different parts of the pallet when the mass of the pallet's been sort of taken into account. Because you could have temperature excursions on certain boxes on top left or right corner, but 80% of your pallet's still well within range. So you won't know, will you, until you have more specific logger positions and everything else. So yeah, it's interesting. I wonder when that will happen. Do you have any foresight on that?
Well, I think right now the best technologies are in the right physical size already. The actually smart solutions are maybe in the price range of like €5 per device, kind of a
Right.
range. So I guess that's already, it starts to be good enough for like very expensive goods and that are
Mm-hmm.
temperature sensitive. You're not going to be able to use those on like every single milk carton or something like that. But I think year over year, the cost will just go down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, agreed. Technology always gets cheaper, doesn't it? So yeah, I didn't, the cost you just mentioned there, I think is a big difference to what it was 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm.
It's certainly going in the right direction. Just on to sort of temperature excursions, etc. In terms of the customers that you speak to, what's the most common cause of temperature excursions you're seeing over the last sort of 12, 18 months?
Probably like any sort of handover of the goods, I would say. When the truck is being loaded or unloaded or these sort of like uh, sitting on a tarmac. Let's say the traditional challenge is that basically any global supply chain has that the temperature on the tarmac might be very, very hot, especially in like hot climates.
Is there any, in terms of the handovers, because you're right, so obviously is the most common, are there certain types of transportation where excursions are more common, like, for example, air tarmac excursions? Is that more common than road, or is it not really something that you've got a feel for at this stage?
Yeah, it's hard to say because the processes can be so different between like different geographical locations and then again like between different companies even, I would say. Yeah, hard to say, but if I would need to give some sort of a guess based on my initial feeling, I would say that there are more risks right now, like with the air freight, because those usually are like the distances are longer and usually the temperature conditions in the like at the destination are usually more different than with the road freight.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And are there certain parts of the world that you see the most temperature excursions happening where infrastructure maybe isn't as strong as it in others, and there tends to be a big problem?
Yeah, well, of course, there's temperature excursions all around. There's no like a single hotspot, but of course, like emerging markets definitely have more, quite a bit more than, let's say, like in Europe or North America. There are big geographical differences, yes.
Okay. And I think a lot of people are talking about sustainability more and more over the last sort of couple of years. And how do you see sustainability changing or sort of temperature control monitoring over the next few years? Do you think it will have an impact, those sort of legislations that are coming in?
For sustainability,
Mm.
I think the big debate right now is around like recycling versus reusing,
Hmm.
especially for cold chain boxes and stuff like that. Also for loggers. We have customers that use single-use loggers and we have customers that use multi-use loggers. And there's pros and cons and there are so many different kinds of supply chains. I think that let's say the focus towards this topic is definitely on the rise.
Hmm.
CO2 emissions are actually becoming like it's becoming a board level discussion rather than
Hmm.
just like a everyday operation kind of a thing. So it's something that is increasingly more important. How it's going to change the industry. I would hope that reusability is growing.
Mm. Why would a customer not use a reusable logger?
Well, sometimes if you're shipping to like hundreds or thousands of locations all around the world, it might be that the small device that are rather low cost, it just might be cheaper and easier to get a new one.
Right. Okay. So it's typically cost driven at that point. I mean, and in your experience, what are the sort of key benefits you see to both? Like a reusable model, I presume that's going to drive cost down to cost down for the customer, and it will meet their sustainability needs if it's done correctly. Are there things that don't quite work with that model that you've seen that we wouldn't be aware of?
Yeah, definitely reusability and reused loggers are a good way to optimize your footprint, to footprint and like reduce e-waste.
Hmm.
If you need to do it in a way that then you would ship, let's say I live here in Finland, Helsinki. If we would ship like individual shipments once a year to 1,000 customers all around the world, single device back from, let's say, Australia, it could be that the logistics, the CO2 emissions, the time used, everything together just to get that one device back, it might be that it just wouldn't make any sense anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, it's just you're right on the packaging side. Everyone's going to there, and obviously they'll do
Mhm.
this. They're doing the same in loggers. And I was just quite interested to see what the customers really, how hard they're pushing for that change, and how that's changed over the last few years. But yeah, as you say, it's probably a case by case basis and doing the calculations as well to make
Yeah,
sure.
it
Yeah.
really is because some of our customers they tend to have like closed loop kind of operations, like you're, let's say, domestically shipping something like a pharma wholesaler or something like that. You have like 1,000 pharmacies or hospitals you're shipping to. Then it's usually rather easy. Like might have like weekly deliveries, so you can
Hmm.
quite easily collect the devices back and use the same device over and over and over again. So then the cost per shipment is very low and it's overall very efficient. The same doesn't apply when you need to include like air freight shipments and stuff like that in between.
Yeah. Okay. And I read that Logmore now works with over 200 companies, which is a phenomenal achievement. And what type of sort of companies suit you best in terms of pharma or biotech for your solution? Do you see, or is it quite universal?
Quite universal, honestly. Like I just mentioned, like pharma wholesalers or commercial pharma, clinical trials, direct to patient. We're trying to serve all of these use cases, and outside of pharma as well. Like we have customers from like catering companies and food production and these sort of things. So
Hmm.
in general, yeah,
It's across the board.
I guess we could summarize that like 9 out of 10 of our customers are switching from USB data loggers to Logmore.
Right. Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's an impressive stat. Is there a real world example you could share, maybe from the pharmaceutical industry, where you sort of prevented product loss or improved the customer's process? Something that we sort of gives a tangible insight into a real example.
There, there could be many that are like under NDAs, but
Hmm.
there's some that are not. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was actually even like a news article in Finland about how our solution was able to save a bunch of vaccines going bad because
Hmm.
our solution had a like this stability budget thing built into the cloud, and our loggers were used to track the shipment. So
Hmm.
basically, they knew that they can still use the vaccines for a few more hours. So they kind of like sped up the process, invited people to get the shots much faster, and were able to save the goods.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's real time monitoring working there, isn't it? So yeah, fantastic. What most surprising use case you've seen? Is there something that's popped up in the last couple of years and you've been quite surprised in terms of how the technology has been implemented or used?
Well, the most surprising would be outside of pharma. It would be batteries, battery logistics, which
Hmm.
is growing fast. Like everything's going electric now. So especially these sort of like BESS solutions, like large battery solutions for grid stabilizing and these sort of things. We are growing in that space very fast. And even though the product is very different from pharmaceuticals, it's
Hmm.
surprisingly same process and need, because the product is still fragile. It's still, it needs to be monitored for safety and quality requirements. So from our perspective, it's basically the same, but it's a very growing market.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Just moving on to sort of the future vision and the technology and everything else. I quite like to understand what maybe is coming down the road in these conversations. And so, what does the next generation of cold chain monitoring look like? Do you think? Let's fast forward maybe 5 years and open it up a little bit to a bit of creative thinking. Where do you think we'll be?
I think the monitoring will become more and more like invisible for the end users. It's going to be more integrated into packaging, and especially, I guess, into labels.
Hmm.
Like in food retail, for example, we can already see that barcodes are being replaced by QR codes. So this sort of trend is enabling them to implement more data, more information into the labels themselves, even into the same QR code that is being used for some other purpose. So I think like loggers and labels are slowly becoming one.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, so in terms of we've seen loggers that have become, loggers always used to be quite bulky items, didn't they? And now they're becoming super thin, almost paper-like.
Yeah.
And if you've been able to integrate barcode scanning into that, then it's a phenomenal step. And then are you then saying that we're reducing down to almost the individual pack being monitored at that point, and that's the next sort of innovation with taking up minimal space and everything else. And obviously, we're trying to get the cost out as well. If we're going at that scale, the cost is going to be
Yeah.
an issue, isn't it? So, right, okay. And do you think that's achievable in the next 3 to 5 years, or do you think we'll do it sooner?
Yeah, I think it's like a reasonable time frame for that. There's already some cool tech out there, and I think like retail is driving this sort of a change because, for example, like I think GS1 had a like target of having like pretty much global coverage for like using QR codes retail stores like next end of next year.
Hmm.
So basically, any store you go to could scan a QR code at the cashier. That QR code, for example, it will contain for food things like best before date. For pharma, it could contain things like stability budget and temperature data and stuff like that. So it could be quite quick that we are able to actually implement stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then if we sit down in 2 or 3 years' time, where do you want to take Logmore in terms of a business? You've obviously had a very fast acceleration to where you've got, and you're quite early stage still. What's your vision in terms of where you want the company to be in a couple of years' time?
Yeah, we definitely want to grow sustainably. We want to be able to actually challenge the industry leaders, help the industry basically to take the next step from the USB data loggers to the smartphone driven era. I would say. So yeah, we want to get global and be a real contender in the industry.
Nice. Okay, great. I know we're sort of pretty much out of time here. If people want to get in contact with you or the team, what's the best way to do that? Are you doing any industry events this year? People come and see the technology and meet you guys?
We're going to be, for example, at the Logipharma EU in Vienna, and so mid-April.
Yep.
So definitely, find our booth there. I'm going to be there. Of course, logmore.com. Connect with me via LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. I definitely will reply you if you message me.
Good, brilliant. Okay, well, Niko, I know we're out of time, but I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a great conversation, and you're a very innovative business that's taken a completely new approach. So I know monitoring is so important for the sector, and what you're potentially developing here is really exciting. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good. So you've been listening to Cold Chain Insights. My name's Thomas Hunt. Please tune in next week for our next guest, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.